Hello and welcome back to phase 2 of my 3-phase fry screaming exercise program. In this phase, we're going to start producing the fry distortion in some basic fry scream sounds. And we'll be working on projecting those sounds, producing some more powerful sounding fry screams, and also working on getting our lows, mids, and highs. But before we get started, I want to talk a little bit more about what a fry scream actually is. What is actually going on in our true chords that allows us to produce these sounds? What is happening mechanically? Now, I've already spoke about the fine balance of tension and contracting the laryngeal muscles to just the right amount, but really, how does that produce any distortion? Now, I'm sure you've probably heard some people say that fry screaming is not actually vocal fry, that it doesn't really have much to do with vocal fry, that it's something else entirely. I kind of disagree with this because mechanically, yeah, it actually does involve vocal fry, but just differently than how most people perform it. Most beginners perform vocal fry like this. But the type of vocal fry that we need for fry screaming is actually this. And this type of vocal fry is more relaxed. It's performed with less tension in the laryngeal muscles and not squeezing as hard. Most people will stiffen up their true chords a lot and try to make that clicking sound. But they're too stiff. We're contracting the muscles too much. As I said before, too much tension. So if we can figure out how to relax the laryngeal muscles and lightly produce vocal fry in our voice, this is more closely related to the distortion of fry screaming. And this is where I want to talk to you about a concept called phonation threshold pressure, or PTP. This is the least amount of air pressure it takes to make our true chords vibrate fast enough to produce our voice. So let's say I was to completely relax my true chords, and then I were to push a little bit of air, and then gradually increase the amount of air pressure that I'm pushing. What you would first hear is nothing, just the sound of air escaping my larynx into my mouth, and then you would start to hear a little bit of vocal fry. And then you would hear more vocal fry, and then you'd hear a little bit of vocal fry, but also a little bit of my voice, and then you would just hear my voice. Because vocal fry is what the true chords do when they don't have enough air to make them fully vibrate and produce your voice. So the fry screaming distortion is actually just below phonation threshold pressure. It is at that place where your true chords are kind of performing vocal fry and also just kind of vibrating, but not really. And this makes a lot of sense if we're talking about producing the fry screaming distortion very softly, but fry screams are much more loud and powerful. So how does this make sense? Well, that is because phonation threshold pressure increases depending on how much you are contracting those laryngeal muscles, because as we contract those muscles harder, the true chords get stiffer, and therefore it takes more air to make them vibrate. Now it's taking a lot of air pressure to produce my voice. So in that example, I was tensing up my true chords a lot, and then I started to increase my air pressure. And once again, you hear vocal fry happen first, and then as I increase the air pressure, my voice starts to get produced. And you could hear my voice sounded so strained because I was really tensing up my true chords. So what this means is that depending on the amount of air pressure we produce, there is an optimal amount of muscle tension we need to generate with the laryngeal muscles and the true chords so that we are always just below the phonation threshold pressure. So let's say we are producing this much air pressure. That means we need to generate this much tension in the true chords so that the air pressure we are using does not exceed the phonation threshold pressure, which would just make the true chords vibrate, and then we'd be singing. If we stay just below the phonation threshold pressure, then we are kind of making our true chords vibrate, but we're also kind of making them perform vocal fry. And that mix of the two is what creates the fry screaming distortion. So at lower air pressures, we only need to tense up the true chords a very small amount, and that allows us to produce the fry screaming distortion very softly. But at higher air pressures, the pressures we need to make our voice get loud, we need to tense up the true chords a little bit more so that we can fry scream at a much louder volume and it sounds powerful. The innocent become the guilty, sentenced to a life of misery. Willingly embracing the strength of their chains, God by a number instead of their names. Okay, so there are two methods that I use to help people figure out the fry screaming distortion. One way is to figure out how to do it very softly, like the soft fry screaming example I demonstrated, and the benefit to learning it this way is you can kind of figure out how to do it with very little stress on the true chords. You can play with it, figure out the right positioning, figure out how it's supposed to feel when you're producing that thick, staticky sounding distortion. And practicing it very softly allows you to build control, and you can kind of just do it wherever you are. Like, I find myself practicing soft fry screams when I'm just like doing chores or, doing the dishes or just going about my day. The downside to learning it softly is that it's not really a fry scream. You still have to then learn how to project it and make it sound powerful and make it louder. And not everybody has an easy time figuring out soft fry. Like, I've taught people how to fry scream without them being able to figure out, doing the softer version of a fry scream. And the other method I use is to teach people how to do it at higher pressures while getting their voice loud and projected. The benefit to learning it this way is that when you get it, you pretty much are doing a fry scream. There might be some fine-tuning you have to do to really hone in on the correct positioning and producing a better distortion, but this is pretty much how it should feel once you figure it out this way. And if you figured out how to do it the soft way with low air pressure, well, you're eventually gonna have to kind of figure out how to do it this way anyway. But the downside to this is you really need to have those foundational skills from phase 1 locked in, because if you're not properly projecting your voice and keeping your true chords relaxed, this is not gonna work. If you don't have those skills locked in and you try this method and figure it out, well, you're probably going to end up doing it with too much tension, and it's going to sound really tight and forced and kind of closed off and constricted. So my school of thought is to teach somebody how to use their voice with very little tension and stay relaxed and gradually add the tension until they hit the sweet spot and they can then do a good fry scream, rather than somebody overshooting it and learning how to use their voice with way too much tension, because if you squeeze really hard, you can kind of produce the fry screaming distortion, but it's just going to sound very tight and constricted, and it's not going to be optimal. Those people have to then undo that process and backtrack to find the sweet spot, but they've built up so much improper motor control. They're so used to using their voice and squeezing that it's really difficult to undo that process. And so I want you to be super aware of what you're feeling in your throat and what you're hearing when you produce the distortion. Does it feel like you're tensing up too much? Does it sound super strained and tight like this? All right, so I'm going to start with explaining how to produce the distortion very softly. Now, with this method, I don't want you to think about it as trying to actively perform vocal fry, trying to actively produce that clicking sound. Instead, I want you to try to speak with very little air pressure, somewhat quietly, and as lazily as you can. Exactly what I am doing right now. And what you can hear is there is a slight hint of vocal fry in my voice, and I'm not doing anything to make it happen other than being just below my phonation threshold pressure. So if I increase my air pressure, now it's my voice. If I decrease my air pressure, now I have that slight hint of vocal fry in my voice. Whoa, hey, 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 ho. And so I call this the creepy voice, and people actually do this all the time, especially men who have a deep voice and they're talking kind of lazily. They get a hint of that fry in their voice, and they don't even realize they're doing it. I've been in lessons with people where I was trying to teach them this, and they just kept trying to actively make something happen. But then a few instances, I'd catch them talking like this, and I'd be like, no, that's it. You just did it as you spoke, and I'm doing it right now. Hey, whoa, whoa, whoa. And there is a really good example of this in the beginning of this old song called Curse of the Virgin Canvas by Alicana. The vocalist starts off by monologuing these lines right at the beginning of the song. He goes, I am here to tell you a story that'll torture your thoughts by day and poison your dreams by night. And that's it. Just this. Hey, hey, hey. Just being right below your phonation threshold pressure. You should be super relaxed. And the fry in your voice is happening on its own. You're not actively trying to make it happen. You're just speaking in a very lazy, relaxed way. You can also think about it like this. Let's say you were taking a nap and then you get a phone call that wakes you up. And so you answer that phone call and you speak, and the person on the other end is like, hey, were you just asleep? Did I just wake you up? Because they can hear that your voice has that raspiness in it. And that's because your true chords have been resting and they're not warmed up. And when you wake up first thing in the morning and you try to speak and your voice is raspy, it's got that morning rasp, that's because your phonation threshold pressure is actually increased when your true chords are not warmed up. So the amount of air pressure that you are used to speaking with to produce your voice is actually not enough to produce your voice when your true chords have been resting. And it's really the same thing. You just have to use less air pressure when you speak and try to speak a little bit more quietly. Right about there. Oh yeah, I'm getting that vocal fry in my voice. It feels so relaxed. I'm not doing anything. I'm just speaking quietly and not giving it as much air pressure. And I have found that this is actually really easy to do after I've allowed my voice to rest for a few hours. So I live alone, and when I get home from work, I don't really have to talk to anybody. Unless I get on the phone or, talk to my gaming friends on Discord, I'm not really using my voice. And when you allow the voice a few hours to rest and the true chords have kind of cooled down and they're not warmed up anymore, then you're actually going to have a slightly increased phonation threshold pressure. So the amount of air pressure that you're used to using to produce your voice is actually going to put you closer to the fry register. And conversely, I find that this is a lot harder to do after I have warmed up my voice. So I warm up and then I practice false chord screams or full power fry screams, and then I try to get into my fry register and practice soft fry. It's a lot harder to do because when your true chords are warmed up and they're loose and ready to go, you actually have a slightly lower phonation threshold pressure. So try the creepy talking exercise at different times throughout the day. Try it when you've allowed your voice to rest for a little bit, and it should be a little bit easier to do. So let's say you figured out how to speak in your fry register. You can, do the creepy voice. It's not difficult. How do you turn that into the fry distortion? Well, you need to do two things. One, you need to add a little bit of tension to your voice, and it's going to be the same thing as doing this. Ah, 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 ah. You can hear that I am squeezing my laryngeal muscles super tight. You don't need that much tension, but it's the same action. It is that same sensation of bringing your true chords together, clenching, but you only need like 10% of that. So the amount that I would add would be closer to this. It would sound like this. Ah, 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 ah. So you start in your fry register, hey, 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 and then you add a little bit of tension, hey, 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 and then you increase your air pressure. Hey, 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 wow, 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 wow. Now, you don't need to do it in steps like that. Like, you don't need to first add the tension and then add the air pressure. When I do it, I'm usually doing both of those things at the same time. So just starting in my fry register and then going right into it like this. Hey, 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 but if it's difficult for you to focus on both air pressure and tension at the same time, then you can do it in steps. Slightly increase the tension first, and then slightly increase the air pressure. But listen to me when I say this. It is a very, very small amount of tension. It is so subtle. Do not clench, do not squeeze too hard. It is an almost imperceptible amount of tension unless you've built that sensory awareness to really be able to feel and sense what you are doing with your voice. Because once again, most people are going to squeeze their laryngeal muscles too hard. So if you're struggling with this, then try backing off on the tension. Try staying a little bit more relaxed when you do it. Try not to squeeze and clench your true chords. And so that's soft fry screaming. Once again, really useful for building motor control, really useful for helping you understand the sensation of what it feels like to produce the fry distortion. But how do we make it louder and make it more like a fry scream? How do we project our voice and then add the distortion to our voice? Well, I find that this is easiest to do in your head voice or your falsetto voice, just your high-pitched voice. And there's a certain type of vocal effect that we're going to try to add to our high-pitched voice. It's not quite yet a fry scream, but it is extremely close to a fry scream and will feel very similar to what a fry scream feels like. And there is a series of exercises that I have found helps to put people in the right frame of mind to actually be able to add this effect to their high-pitched voice. So do these exercises first just to put you in the right mindset and then try to add the effect to your voice. But we're going to start off with doing just a few minutes of the owl exercise from phase 1. And once again, your true chords should feel very relaxed. It should sound relaxed. You shouldn't hear or feel any straininess in your voice. Your true chords should just be fluttering in the wind along for the ride. From there, you're going to try to hold the owls out for a little bit longer and try to hit different notes with them. You don't perfectly have to hit those notes, but what's really important is that we're just kind of modifying the pitch a little bit so you can try to do something like this. So really just warm up your head voice while staying very relaxed. And then from there, we're going to try to add the effect to our voice. And the effect that I'm talking about is this. So it's this kind of whiny, raspy effect that you're trying to add to your head voice. To me, it reminds me of like deflating a balloon. And so one method that I've had success with getting people to produce this effect in their voice is to start on the owl exercise. So you're going to be doing a whoo, but then you're going to hold it out and try to go into a ha at a higher pitch. Or you can think about it as like trying to produce the voice of Mario. Now, I imagine that some of you are going to have a hard time getting this effect in your head voice, so here are some clips of me teaching other people how to do it, giving them feedback and guiding them through it, just so you can kind of see the process of somebody else learning to get this effect in their voice. Because when you start to get this effect in your voice, it's probably not going to sound exactly the way that it sounds when I do it, because I've been practicing it for a long time. So this way, these clips can be more representative of what it might sound like as a beginner starts to get this whiny effect in their head voice. Did you hear that for a split second?
Yes.
That hint of the...
Oh, wait, okay, I can do...
That.
Okay, that's not what I thought I was trying to do. Okay.
Do you hear that?
Okay.
That sound. That's... You're getting more like TV staticky sound in there. You hear that? That's what we're going for. Not that. Not that. Not that. Go back to what you were doing.
Not that.
Not that.
So not that. We don't want that.
I mean, I feel like when you get clicky like that, you're not in the right ballpark. Versus what you just did like a minute ago, where I was giving you thumbs up, that was the closest you've ever been. Like, that was like, you had the clicks sped up really fast. They weren't as prominent. Like, it's really...
It almost doesn't even sound like the same sound.
No.
You know?
Because when you are doing it the way you've been doing it, and you're kind of getting like a... Like, the clicks are very prominent. You can hear them.
Yeah.
But with the fry scream, you want more of a... Where the clicks are a little bit more sped up and they're not as prominent. It's like they're all blending together, and it gives you that staticky effect. And I did record that. I've been recording. So I can send that to you to listen. Unless you've been recording.
Yeah, I'm recording it too.
So like, next time you practice, I want you to first warm up with the owls and the sirens, and warm up your voice in a relaxed, soft way. Then project it a bit. Keep it relaxed while adding, the energy. And then try to mimic that sound.
Whoa!
Yep.
Whoa!
A little too.
Whoa!
That one was good.
Whoa!
You're getting there.
Whoa!
That's it.
Whoa!
There you go.
Whoa! Oh yes, and yes, that is the fucking feeling.
Yes.
Yeah, right there. I had the feeling that I know it was going to feel like when I had it, where I could have just fucking gone into it. Okay.
You just didn't know.
All right.
You know what it's supposed to feel like. You just can't do it until you.
I just can't fucking get there. Yes. Okay, but right there, I was there for a second. I was like, oh yeah, I could fucking I could scream with this, you know?
Yeah.
I could scream with this. Okay.
It's such a.
Okay.
You did it.
We made it there. We made it there.
So keep working on that. Okay. If you can find that sound again, and like there were a couple moments there where you got back into that really like super clicky sound, but you corrected, you noticed it. You're like, no, faster clicks, less prominent clicks. Get back into that staticky, raspy sound. Okay, so real quick, start with the owls. Just do it like 3 times. We've already done it quite a bit. Good. Now can you kind of raise the pitch a little bit more? So start on the who and come to a ha. Think about it like Mario doing the you kind of got a little dry. I want you to be more like and you can still kind of hear my falsetto head voice under the little bit of distortion that I'm producing. Stay relaxed. You're doing great. You're doing great. I'm just nitpicking small things.
Totally.
Okay. What do you feel with that? Like when you start producing the distortion, what does that feel like to you?
That to me is what I think of when I finally. It's like when you have like a sander belt and you put something on it and sparks fly. It's like this weird little like. Doesn't hurt. Feels completely natural.
You see, it's funny that you have that like mental image of it, because to me, it reminds me of sand, like sandpaper,
yes,
or like an hourglass as like the sand flows through the hourglass.
Same.
Does that make sense? It's like it sounds sandy.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it.
So listen to how relaxed I am. You still got a little bit of tension, like you're kind of going, ooh, ooh. I can tell you're a little bit too tensed up when you're doing it. Completely relaxed. Ooh. Build your air pressure as you go up, because your voice is kind of falling apart because you're not increasing your air pressure. Ooh. That is pretty much it. I know that doesn't sound like a fry scream. I mean, it kind of does. To me, it does. You just got to work on it, and you got to put more voice and energy into it. It'll come with a little more practice, but that is how it should feel. Okay? That's how it should sound. Because look, you're doing it like this. Way less energy, which is fine for practice, but eventually you want to get to like full send, full power. All right, so you've pretty much got it a few times now during this lesson. You started to produce a hint of the fry distortion in there. And I've got you starting on the owl, whoo, and then coming into the wah, which I feel like has been really good for you.
Yeah.
I'll try it a few more times.
Okay.
Nice. You got a little bit of the fry distortion at the end there. Just it wasn't stable. Your voice kept cracking, but that was in the ballpark of it. Mm-hmm. Say what you said earlier about the tension.
Oh, so yeah, I found when I'm adding that little bit of tension, once I'm like gotten up and to the volume I want, I'm usually overshooting the tension, and because I just think of it in terms of how much tension do I need to add on. But it helped once I decided to think of it as slowing, like the speed of which I'm adding the tension. If I try and just slowly put it on and don't think about quantity or like percentage of tension, it just seemed to go on a lot smoother and a lot lighter, which prevents me from overshooting, I find. So,
and like eventually, like if you keep thinking about it like that, you're gonna be able to do this. So like just like going from 0 to 100% tension, like it's like being able to like know where 10% is or 30% is or like 80% is, and knowing like what range is where your fry scream is at.
Yeah, and that's where I want to get, because right now it feels like I just have like instead of having a dial where you can go from 0 to 100, just feels like I've got a switch. It's either on or off. Which
that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
Try it a few more times.
Okay.
That one was really good. Yeah, right there at the end for a sec. Yeah, you stabilized it.
Shaky, but like I can feel it a lot different than the techniques I was using before. So,
So when you before you emailed me, talk about how like the issues you were having with your fry scream.
Well, so the main thing, because like I liked all the tones I was getting, stuff, and like I like the sound I was getting, but just as my band has started gearing up to play some live shows, we started practicing. I'm like figured out, oh wow, I can only get 3, 4, maybe 5 songs if I'm lucky into our practice before I am just dried out. It feels like there's not a lot of, it feels like it just fades into nothing after roughly 4 songs. And so there was just too much airiness in the scream, and it was just everything was drying out. And obviously when you're trying to play live shows, you don't want to be the guy that burns out after 3 songs and then the rest of the set, even playing a short set, even if your last song is just trash. That's not the look I want for myself or the band, right? I want to be the best I can. So yeah, just finding something to eliminate that airiness, because right off the bat, even doing it this way, and I know I'm like kind of just figured out this way a little bit, I still have to get a little more of the distortion on there. But even like right away, as soon as it clicked with me today, I'm like, okay, I feel that airiness is not there. It doesn't feel like just air rushing through. It just feels more like I can feel my voice in there more, and then the distortion on top of it, instead of before it just felt like pushing air through everything. And yeah, I got the tones I liked and the sounds I wanted, but with that airiness, it just doesn't have the longevity.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's a big thing for me.
Yeah. So essentially, you were doing it with way too much tension. It was almost like you were doing soft fry, but trying to make it as loud as you could.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like back when I originally learned a few years ago, there wasn't even back then there wasn't as much on YouTube and stuff. So I just had like this collection of 15 different people I'd see all saying different things and trying to piece it together myself. So that's kind of where I was. It was more that soft fry, but then trying to push that into something louder that would
Hmm.
work better in like mixed in with music, right? So yeah, I got to those tones I liked, but using that soft fry and then just pushing through it, it's just gonna dry out super quick. So
So, if you can get that whiny, raspy effect in your voice, then you're on the right track. Just keep practicing it, working at it, get it stable, and then progress to adding the tension to it, just like we did with the soft fry screaming distortion. And it's the same action, just doing this. Just performing that action with your true chords while doing the whiny, raspy falsetto voice. You don't have to tense up that hard. I was just really exaggerating it for you. Like I said before, it's really only going to be like 10, maybe up to 30% of that amount of tension, but it should feel extremely similar to that action. So that's the level of control that you ultimately want to develop. The ability to go from no tension all the way up to just the right amount of tension for your fry scream, that is going to allow you to do so many cool things with the fry scream. But if you can't quite get the whiny, raspy effect in your falsetto voice, you're probably overshooting it a little bit, and that's okay because my goal is that if you overshoot it, you're at least gonna be producing a sound that is closer to the fry screaming distortion, and that's our ultimate goal anyway. But if you practice and work on that whiny, raspy effect in your falsetto voice, and you can get it really stable, then it's going to help you develop that level of control. Another thing that whiny, raspy effect does is it allows you to do what are called pitched fry screams, where you can kind of belt a note and add a hint of the fry screaming distortion to it because you can control the amount of tension you're adding to your voice, and you can add just enough to get a hint of the fry screaming distortion in your voice, but you're still hitting a note. You're not fully distorting it, and that way you can kind of harmonize more with the instruments. This is what Sam Carter from Architects does. But alternatively, if you can't quite get the whiny, raspy effect in your voice super well, then you can try adding the tension a little bit earlier and seeing if that nudges you closer towards producing the fry screaming distortion, even if it's only a little bit of it. But either way, I think that learning it like this is going to help you add the right amount of tension to your voice and figure out what it feels like to produce a fry scream while you are projecting your voice and getting your voice loud. And when you're doing the whiny, raspy effect in your voice, or when you're doing your, relaxed falsetto voice, you want to be loud. You don't want to be like kind of quiet like with the soft fry. You should be projecting your voice a bit. You don't want to be yelling and like really trying to wake your neighbors up, but you do want to be producing your voice at a reasonable volume. Get your true chords vibrating with a decent bit of energy, give it some air pressure, add the tension, and see what happens. So let's say you practice this for a few weeks, and by the end of it, you're able to do a decent high-pitched fry scream. Well, the next goal is then to descend into your mid-range. One exercise I like is to start on a high-pitched fry scream and then try to just kind of throw yourself into your mid-range. So you're starting on that high, you're getting the distortion going, and you're trying to quickly lower the pitch while keeping the distortion going. It's almost like you're trying to break into your mid-range by brute force. So at first, it might be hard to keep the distortion going as you lower the pitch, but keep trying it. Try to stabilize it. Try to keep that distortion going as you descend. And once you're able to kind of enter your mid-range fry scream and it becomes more comfortable and you kind of know what it feels like to be in your mid-range, then you can just try starting on your mid-range. Wow! 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 And then it's kind of the same process with low-pitched fry screams. You can do the same exercises, starting on a high and trying to descend and drop it even lower past your mid-range and try to get as low as you can while keeping the distortion going. And then once you can access your lows and get really comfortable with it, then just trying to start on your lows without first having to start on a high or a mid and then drop it lower. Now, for low-pitched fry screams, I personally feel like it is the hardest vocal technique known to man because I struggled with my low-pitched fry screams for a really long time, and I still kind of struggle with them till this day. When I first started trying to get my low-pitched fry screams, I had problems with keeping the distortion stable, so my voice would often crack or the distortion would just kind of fall apart, and it was hard to produce a really thick and good-sounding distortion. But through the many hours that I spent practicing them, I learned some things along the way that have definitely helped. The first tip I have is use the chin tuck positioning. It automatically makes your voice deeper. The second tip I have is try using a little bit less air pressure than you're used to using for your mids or your highs. This is because when the true chords are producing lower pitched sounds, they are put in a slightly slackened position. They're not being stretched out as much as they need to when they produce high pitched tones. And that little bit of slack in the true chords automatically causes there to be less tension in the true chords. And so that means phonation threshold pressure is going to be slightly lower. And so I have found that by using a little bit less air pressure in my low-pitched fry screams, I have improved them a lot. I've got the distortion sounding a lot thicker, my voice doesn't break or crack as much. So if you struggle with lows, just try using a little bit less air pressure. And the last tip I have for you is tongue positioning. So whether we're doing a low-pitched false chord scream or a low-pitched fry scream, it helps to try to curl your tongue back and imagine you're trying to shove your tongue deep down into your throat. Ah. Oh. Ooh. Ooh. And so that's pretty much it for phase 2. Phase 2 is all about just figuring out how to do the fry distortion, learning how to project it so you can make it sound like a powerful fry scream, and then figuring out how to do it at your other pitch ranges. In terms of a practice plan, I would say just use the phase 1 exercises to warm up, along with any other warm-ups that you find useful. I also find that practicing a little bit of clean singing as part of my fry screaming warm-up routine is really useful too. Now, before you move on to phase 3, I would say the end goal for phase 2 is just getting the distortion sounding decent and being able to project it. Don't worry if you can't quite access every range, so maybe you're struggling with your lows like I did, or maybe you can only kind of get into a little bit of your mid-range, but the bottom half of it is still hard for you. Don't worry about that. Just produce the distortion, get it sounding decent, get it projected, and then move on to phase 3. And the last thing that I want to leave you with is if you check the description, I have created a list of bands with vocalists that primarily use fry screams. This is so that you can listen to those vocalists and hear what fry screams are supposed to sound like, and that can hopefully help guide your practice. And lastly, I've created some recordings of me performing soft fry, performing the whiny, raspy falsetto voice, and then transitioning from the whiny, raspy falsetto voice into a high-pitched fry scream. I've uploaded those to a Google Drive folder for you to download. The link is in the description. If you need something to listen to try to mimic and imitate to help guide your practice, that's there for you as well. And so that is it for this video. If you like the way I teach metal vocals and you want to support my channel, please, please, please leave a thumbs up, comment, subscribe. I will see you in phase 3.